Hey now, everybody. Matt Lawton here, and this is the Astrological Winds channel. And we are going to look at the weekly astrological weather forecast for the week of April 13th through the 19th. And this week, look at this week, it's kind of like two different types of energies this week in effect. In the first part of the week and through most of what would normally be the work week for those who are still working, there's an intensity level that involves our Jupiter Pluto conjunction again, and really can get it into some over the top places. But then by the weekend, we have a pretty big shift in energy and moving towards like a more positive relationship type situation. So look at those two different main energies of this week. And so the first one has a lot to do with what's been going on all year, which, is our Pluto-Saturn conjunction that started the year in Capricorn, and Jupiter joining them in January. Now, once again, as I've said, Saturn has moved on to Aquarius, but last week, Jupiter caught up to Pluto, so really started to accelerate a lot of issues and energy of this year and that Capricorn signature of those three planets in Capricorn together for a while earlier in the year. So the sun in Aries, been in Aries for a couple of weeks or so now. In fact, getting near the end of its Aries time. It's in the last week of Aries this week, but it's of course then reached those lower 20-degree numbers, mid 20-degree numbers of Aries, where it is now going to be square the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction this week. So that's going to be the big energy of the week. So when the sun comes in Aries, very strong sun, talked about that before, the sun is exalted in Aries, but also very pushing for itself, very motivated, very focused on its own self and motivations, a lot of ego energy tied up in Aries and the sun. So when it's squaring Jupiter and Pluto, there's a tension that's building up. And so basically what we have here is what can be an inflation of our ambition and what we want to do, like our power tripping, basically what we want to do can really come into some very tense, challenging times this week. And the Sun-Pluto part of it is interesting in itself, because that can be, just some really, really deep power tripping energy that can come up, and people can run old programs under Sun Pluto that come up from their subconscious without them realizing it, and get really obsessed without and this really narrow focused vision on that. So it really can bring up a lot of what I call psychic debris up to the surface. And if people aren't aware of that, they can get on these really power tripping kind of energy where they're really coercive about how they approach things to get what they want. So it can create an incredible amount of tension, and it, really can get people like into some really like intense situations with others. And what's interesting about that, like, too, is like, normally I would say, like, yeah, the good way to use that energy actually is to confront that psychic debris, so to speak, in yourself and be aware and try to find where, like, these subconscious patterns are, like, coming up to the surface and confront yourself about it rather than, like, trying to blame others, trying to blame situations, or whatever it may be, which is really difficult in and of itself to do by itself. So, but like, if you can do that, it allows like creative change to come in and kind of change the way you look at things. And that's kind of what really needs to happen in that situation. It's interesting too, like, even though Pluto is, obviously one of the most outer planets or bodies in our solar system that, is having an effect on the energies of life on Earth. But, a lot of times, like, when it becomes involved with, like, the sun, say, or an inner planet, it really can be between you and these like greater energies of like the universe and life itself to kind of like iron out a lot of that stuff. But we also have Jupiter involved. And Jupiter is one of those two social planets where it's not going to really be possible to keep that Sun Pluto processing between us and that higher energy, like, of evolution and change. Like, where, the societal part of this, the Jupiter part of this, is just like got a big part in that too. So we can't just like disconnect from what's going on in society and confront our own psychic debris, say in private or something. Like, the Jupiter part is like what is like a lot of the triggering of that psychic debris, the stuff that's happening in society. So we have like, Sun Jupiter square normally is not a very tough square, actually. It's normally like people like can be really positive and optimistic and in a growth pattern. And if anything, they're trying to take on too much. That's usually the problem with Sun Jupiter in a square, is like you're trying to take on too much. But in Capricorn, there's not too much to take on. Jupiter is very unhappy in Capricorn. It's limited, and it does not want to be limited. Jupiter's all about expansion and growth. So it's in a cranky mood. It's just not in a good mood, and it's not good when an authoritarian energy like Jupiter has is in a cranky mood, because the expansion that's going to occur is more likely going to occur in what we perceive as negative ways. So with Sun Jupiter, one of the other issues that can come up when it's a tougher aspect is an arrogance and a self-righteousness that is very hard to penetrate, and that can turn a lot of people off, no matter how positive you are. To me, a good example of that, and this is not to put anybody down, it's like, a preacher can be a very positive person, but if his message is rubbing people the wrong way, it will turn a certain segment of those people off to his message. So that's what like Sun Jupiter can be like when it gets too arrogant or too self-righteous about its value system. And that's a lot of what Jupiter has to do with. So like when I see like Sun Jupiter square with Jupiter in such a weak position and the sun in such a strong position, which is an egotistical, individual, subjective viewpoint position, and then we add in the Pluto power and a lot of like, subconscious psychic debris dictating what the sun and Aries is doing, we have potentially just a really roiling, boiling stew going on where the Jupiter is expanding that arrogance and negativity and authoritarianism and subjective viewpoints and, not allowing in other energy and input. So to me, it really can be a week, this week, where it's going to be really not only difficult in our personal lives to control the energy coming up from the subconscious, which a lot of it is fearful, a lot of it is mysterious, inexplicable, that kind of thing, which is hard enough to confront by ourselves, but we're actually doing this together on a societal level. So we're like kind of feeding that, and then the reaction to that for those who are in power, that Capricorn part, that Pluto part, is to become even more authoritarian, to slap even harder control down, to restrict even more, to dictate what behavior should be even more. And through Jupiter, that's through the law, that's through information and higher knowledge, that's through travel, that's through other cultures, that's through medicine. So all the things that are being affected on a societal level by quarantining, by social distancing, by the virus all over the world, something that we're all sharing right now. So you can see, once again, this week's going to be a very difficult week for society because of our Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter thing that really is in effect this whole year. The sun is triggering that in a very tense way this week. So once again, best suggestion is to confront yourself about the intense energy coming up and realize that your mind is getting obsessed with a lot of ideas that are just based on your own values, and try not to get lost in a preachy, arrogant tone about it. But it's going to be difficult. It's difficult alone without the Jupiter involved. And with the Jupiter in society and everyone feeling that way, it kind of just is this self-fulfilling prophecy. This is what we mean in quantum physics when we say, we're creating our own thoughts. And our own thoughts are creating our own reality. So the thoughts that we're creating or allowing in are creating the reality that we're sharing together on a societal level right now. That's the Jupiter part. So, okay, so that's, not easy, not an easy thing for sure. And remember, the sun is still conjunct Aries too. So there's a lot of chaos, a lot of upsetting events, things like that. Mercury is conjunct Chiron at the same time too. And once again, message there, need to be responsible for our own healing, bring in the information and do what we need to do that's best for us. Okay, so the other thing that's really, is on the weekend, speaking of Mercury in Aries will sextile Mars in Aquarius, and it's going to trine Venus in Gemini. So that's really sweet. That's really like the three personal planets, the planets that dictate most of what goes on in our everyday existence, communications, relationships, and our actions are working together harmoniously next weekend. So that's really good. And Mercury sextile Mars usually can be like, especially with Mercury in Aries again, can be definitely like one of those like you're definitely very focused on what you're doing, but you can You have a really good attitude about it. It's positive, and you're making good connections with those you need to make them with, that your goals are congruent with theirs. So, like, there's benefit for both of you. So you can get a tremendous amount of, like, mental, intellectual type work done, a lot of communication, information sharing, negotiating, things like that. And then, then you bring in Venus and Gemini too, trining or sextiling Mercury, and at the same time in a trine kind of relationship with Mars. And then you have a situation where there's just really great balance between yin yang energy, both inside ourselves and therefore projecting out towards others and our relationships. So really great balance. And incidentally too, that's a highly creative energy going on too. So, like, anything that's, your creativity outputs next weekend is a really good time for that. So, like, and once again, it's air, it's that air energy. So, like, a lot of the connecting is probably going to be, because of our current situation, over the airwaves, so to speak, over, the internet and our electronic ways of communicating. Okay, and then so the other big shift, or the other thing on the weekend, is the sun is finally going to be moving on from Aries and entering Taurus on Sunday. So the middle part of the spring in the northern hemisphere is coming in. And normally the sun in Taurus slows us down, and we start to, really enjoy more of the physical creature material comforts of the earth in the spring. Things, for the northern hemisphere anyway, things are growing, things are coming back into our physical world that we can enjoy more. And so, like, when the sun is in Taurus, it likes to slow things down, take a slower approach, enjoy its material comforts. Very dedicated to our friends and family. Will overlook their their issues, sweep them kind of under the rug, so to speak. That's something that Taurus is really good at, actually, is sweeping harder issues under the rug and kind of just, like, enjoying what's going on around instead. So kind of getting into that mode, but can get, remember too, you can get really fixed and stubborn when Taurus energy comes in too. And, and certain people can have a tendency to overindulge in, material resources. So there's always that thing of, like, watch your diet or whatever. But yeah, so there's that shift that's going to start, to occur into that Taurus energy. Venus has already been through Taurus, and like I said, is going to spend a lot of time in Gemini in the next few months because of that retrograde. So you got to get ready for that. But I mean, in a certain kind of way, when you think about the sun in Taurus and what's going on with us now, it's kind of almost like you think, well, if the quarantining and stuff is going to go on for who knows how long, I guess the next few weeks we can use to just slow our lives down and enjoy what's around us. And for those in the northern hemisphere, it's the springtime, and Taurus is, like, all about gardening and stuff. So maybe go throw a few seeds in the ground somewhere, or, get into projects around your home, physical projects around your home and things like that. So good way to use that energy once it starts up next weekend. All right. This is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I do all kinds of astrological readings. So if you need any help, contact me. We can discuss costs. And my email is matthuE@gmail.com. Okay, until next time, stay well.